Alright, we're back for more Metroid. It's felt like forever, but this one's been out since 2017, so why is it taking me so long to talk about this game, even though as some of you know, I love Metroid. Simply put, I just didn't have a 3DS capture card at the time. They were either too expensive or too unreliable for my liking, and I didn't feel comfortable with the idea of having my 3DS's innards tampered with, and I still don't. Since then, however, I've bought an older 3DS model and found a capture card installation service for a much more reasonable offer, allowing me to finally review 3DS games, as well as legitimately record older DS games without the use of an emulator. And what better game to try this out with than the latest Metroid title, Metroid Samus Returns.
Here we go, my very first 3DS review. It's about damn time, too. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Nintendo's official remake for the second game in the Metroid series, Metroid II: Return to Samus. I do wish they could have picked a better name for the remake, cause that does make things a little confusing, but I get why they did it. After all, it had been 7 years since the last Metroid game, the last proper Metroid game, and that particular title was Metroid Other M, which longtime fans had mixed to highly negative feelings about, with the last respected Metroid game back then being Metroid Prime 3 from 2007. However, during E3 2017, we were not only promised a fourth Metroid Prime game that as of this date unfortunately won't be coming anytime soon due to development issues and having to redo everything from scratch, but we were also going to receive Nintendo's own remake of Metroid 2. This makes this the first 2D title since Metroid Zero Mission came out in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance. How sad is that? I say Nintendo's own remake because about a year before this, we were already given a damn good fan remake of Metroid 2 by Milton Gausti / Dr. M64 called Aeion 2R, another Metroid 2 remake. Here, the good doctor took the original Game Boy title and gave it the Zero Mission treatment with a few add-ons, but sadly the game suffered copyright strikes upon release and had to be taken down. Luckily, it's been spread across the internet far and wide at this point, so finding a copy won't be a problem, but it seems that Nintendo really wanted their remake to be the one and only remake, though if you ask me, I think Aeion 2R is the better game personally. I reviewed it back when it was still quite fresh, so I'll leave a card at the top in case you're interested to see my thoughts on it. As for Metroid Samus Returns, development would be done by Mercury's team, who were responsible for the Castlevania Lords of Shadow series. I played the first Lords of Shadow game years ago, but I barely remember what happened in it, except for the ending. It was an alright game, I didn't have many problems with it, it just wasn't anything that special. Mercury's team didn't even want to remake Metroid 2 at first. They instead wanted to redo Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, but the director for several Metroid titles, Yoshio Sakamoto, opted for them to remake the second game, where he would act as the lead producer. Sakamoto believed that Metroid 2 is too important a part of the series' timeline to simply ignore, and yeah, I fully agree with him. Besides, Metroid Fusion doesn't even need changing that much, whereas Metroid 2 definitely had some things that could have been improved on from its Game Boy limitations. Story-wise, it's exactly the same as the original in Aeion 2R, but I'll give a quick recap anyway. Mother Brain and the Space Pirates have been defeated by Samus, and Planet Zebes is no more, so the next mission is to head to the Metroid homeworld, Planet SR388, to wipe their race to extinction, all the while looking for missing Galactic Federation troops that tried to do the same thing. Spoilers, they didn't make it, as the Metroids seem to have evolved over the course of time into even greater threats, so wiping them all out is not going to be as easy as it seems. Very basic plot, but Samus Returns does provide these Chozo memories you can unlock by collecting a certain amount of item expansions, hinting that there's still more to come. You can tell that Mercury's team really wanted to remake Metroid Fusion. Not that I'm opposed to the idea, but whether or not they'll follow through with it, I couldn't tell you. But it's nice to know that the Metroid series hasn't been entirely forgotten after all. At least that's what I'll be telling myself anyway. Gameplay is largely the same as the original too, but obviously it's been modernized for today's generation. Controls are pretty much the same as they were in Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission, though I can't quite tell, but I think Samus might be a little more floaty in this game. I don't know, it still plays fine, but something about the way she handles just seems a bit different than usual. Nothing that can't be adjusted to anyway, and wall jumping returns as well, but the game's decided to go back to the Metroid Fusion way of doing it, where you can't pull yourself back as soon as you leap off the wall. You're heading in one direction and one direction only. Not that you'll be using the wall jump much anyway, because there are very few opportunities to use it, unlike the previous games, due to much tighter spaces. You can't abuse it like you can in Super Metroid, let's just leave it at that. At the very least, Samus has a few more tricks up her sleeve this time. Added to her moveset is now aiming in 360 degrees to take care of enemies that couldn't be dealt with in any of the 8 directions that you had in Super Metroid, Fusion, or Zero Mission. This is a really great ability, and it's saved my life on several occasions, but this comes at a major consequence since you need to hold down the L button and use the circle pad to aim. With the way this control scheme is laid out, this means Samus has to have her feet planted to the ground while she's aiming, leaving her completely exposed. Not even the circle pad Pro or that little nub on new 3DSs help negate the problem in any way, and with how useful the precise aiming is, you're gonna find yourself stopping most of the time to kill an enemy. That also goes for Samus's melee counterattacks brought over from the 3DS Lords of Shadow game. When an enemy flashes for a split second, that signals a dangerous attack they're going to do, but Samus can deflect that by pressing the X button at the right time, where she can proceed to shoot the crap out of that enemy. This works on the Metroids too, in fact it's no doubt the best way to take them on. It sort of reminds me of the finishing moves in Other M, but again, because the counterattack is so helpful in these situations, there's a lot of stop and go scenarios happening, potentially killing the flow at points. It's not until you get very far into the game when you obtain the plasma beam to shoot through enemies that the gameplay speed finally starts increasing. You've got to really stick it out before you get to the pace you're used to in a Metroid game, and that may be a turnoff to some people. Not to mention, Samus Returns is without question one of the hardest Metroid games in a long time, probably more so than the original Metroid II. Enemies and Metroids can be utterly aggressive in this game. Reflexes will be put to the test in nearly every encounter. It's been ages since I've seen the game over screen so many times in a Metroid title, but thankfully, and I can't believe this is the first in the series to do this, we have a checkpoint system. So dying to someone like a Metroid will just put you back before the fight instead of the last save point. That's handy, though some Gamma Metroids do have a habit of escaping to another room, which is pretty damn irritating. I just want to kill him and move on to the next Metroid. This was not a good change for me, and I also would have been grateful for a few more exclusive boss fights to the remake. Zero Mission gave us at least a couple of extra bosses, and despite them being pathetically easy, it was still a nice inclusion. Aside from the Queen Metroid, all we get in Samus Returns is the Diggernaut, who's quite the challenge to beat, but there's just a smidge of trial and error here which I don't really like. The Queen Metroid herself, while definitely a far greater battle than her original counterpart, also involves some trial and error, particularly when you have so little time to counter her in order to get inside her stomach and blow her insides out. It's sad when a fan remake has a much greater amount of exclusive boss fights that are also more fun to fight than the ones in the official remake. To be fair, there is one other boss battle at the very end that wasn't in the original, and while I somewhat predicted that it would happen, the fight was still entertaining, and it was really awesome to see the baby Metroid kick some ass again. In regards to the difficulty, however, maybe using Samus's newly acquired Aeion abilities could help reduce the pain, as long as you have enough in this yellow meter to use them. The first one you get is the scanner that reveals a portion of the map area you're currently at, while also showing any item expansions in addition to breakable surfaces on the main screen. This is a great add-on. I would have preferred having this in some of the older games, and it's much more practical than something like X-ray vision in Super Metroid or Metroid Prime. I know that technically doesn't make secrets that secret anymore, but I personally never liked how despite having X-ray vision and a map system, there were still a few expansions in places that you wouldn't even think to look at. Next up is the lightning armor that allows Samus to absorb any damage inflicted upon her and is necessary to travel through dangerous terrain. The more damage she receives, the more the meter is drained. This is the Aeion ability I tend to use the most with how painful enemy attacks can be. It's helped me on a number of occasions when I was getting pretty low on health. Thirdly, we have the Beam Burst that transforms Samus's arm cannon into a Gatling gun of sorts, which looks cool, but it chews through the meter like nothing else. I usually just reserve this for the enemies that can't be killed without it. Lastly, there's the Phase Drift, which simply put is like a reverse speed booster. It slows down time so that you can bypass obstacles that disappear too quickly, and in case you want to move faster than the enemies. It even works on bosses, though like the Beam Burst, the meter runs out too quickly to be useful, so it's a rather situational power-up for me. The regular power-ups, however, are still just as fun to use as they've ever been. All of them, except for the speed booster for some reason, are back from Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission to breathe new life into Metroid 2. Beams stack up again, power bombs have a nice juicy explosion, and the super missiles provide a satisfying kick. Though the ice beam is actually pretty useless in this game. It's the only beam that's separated from the others, and all it does is freeze enemies in place for you to stand on, not having a grander role to play until the first generation of Metroids come in. The other power-up that's been slightly altered is the screw attack, but thankfully this one still mostly plays the same. There are just some enemies that require you to jump into them a couple of times instead of killing them instantly. A bit odd, but I suppose the screw attack was always kind of overpowered in the older 2D games, and it doesn't take too long to get used to how this game's iteration works. Samus Returns, just like the Game Boy original, is also one of the more linear games in the Metroid series. You'll often come across plenty of roadblocks in your path which you need to go around, stuff like slippery walls to prevent you from using the spider ball, or access to secret areas with item expansions that you need an already acquired power-up to get get through, even when the game doesn't tell you you can do it, like launching yourself in ball form with power bombs. Similar to the slower gameplay speed, however, some folks may not enjoy the linearity nearly as much as the older games, but if you've never found the non-linearity that appealing to begin with, then this may be a good alternative for you. If you've played Fusion, then you should have an idea of what you're getting into. I couldn't tell you what areas have been remade from the Game Boy original and where they are. Samus Returns is almost like an entirely different game. It's quite lengthy for a side-scrolling Metroid title as well, just under 10 hours, assuming you're somewhat the explorative type anyway and you're deliberately looking for item expansions. I don't appreciate how some of them are only accessible just after you've killed every single Metroid, and Junior needs to eat these little crystals to let you pass by. I didn't think that was necessary, and it dragged the game down further despite it only being optional. To assist with the exploring at least, the bottom screen holds the map and the UI while the top screen shows the action, and I like this setup. I'm able to see more of what's ahead, and I don't need to pause the game every time to know where I'm going. You can even place pins on the map in case you ever think about going back to that particular area. Great for giving little reminders should you need it, like for those power-ups you need the baby Metroid to get through. Not a fan though of how switching between beams and missiles needs you to tap these buttons on the bottom screen. It's a total pace breaker and unideal in the midst of combat. Samus Returns also has Amiibo support of the Metroid lineup, but aside from unlocking art in the gallery, they each give you different small reserve tanks for energy, missiles, and Aeion abilities, which is handy but not mandatory. The baby Metroid Amiibo, however, is one of my personal favorites in my collection. The head is so squidgy. And in addition to showing you where the Metroids are on the map, it also unlocks a fusion difficulty setting, and holy crap is it punishing. You can only take a few hits before you're dead, but it is neat to see the fusion suits again. It just sucks so much that the baby Metroid Amiibo as well as the Metroid II Samus Amiibo are very hard to come by these days. I don't understand why so few were made, and as you can guess, the prices are ludicrous if you plan on getting the full experience. I got lucky with the baby Metroid, but I sadly don't have the other Samus Amiibo, and I hope that more are gonna be made, though considering that Samus Returns is well over 2 years old now, it's not looking likely. Plastic paywall shouldn't be a thing if you're not going to make enough plastic in the first place. Taking away the Amiibo support and a few other issues with the game, Samus Returns is a great, well, return to form. Even though I think AM2R has more love and passion dedicated to it than this game, I am still extremely grateful that an official Metroid II remake exists, and that Nintendo haven't totally glanced over our faithful bounty hunter. It looks great for a 3DS game, the music is top notch once again with longtime Metroid composer Kenji Yamamoto directing, and learning their lesson from Other M, there's no dialogue. Completely silent, the best kind of storytelling when done right, and this is one of those times. If you haven't sold your 3DS yet to make up for Switch costs, please buy this game and give the series some support so that Nintendo can continue making more entries. It's not the best Metroid title out there, and the process of killing Metroids can still be repetitive, but it's a great one to add to the collection.
And with that, the next time we're looking at Metroid will be whenever Prime 4 comes out. I suppose I don't have an excuse anymore for not doing that game. Alright folks, so before we tackle Prime 4 in the near or far future, we will talk about Metroid Prime Federation Force for the 3DS. Until that time comes, however, we're going to be kicking off the Persona spin-off marathon, starting with the Arena series, so I hope you're looking forward to that. You all have a good day, and thank you for watching. I've bought an older 3DS model, and also gained... I've bought a and what better way to... God damn it. Without the use of an emulator. God damn it. Starting with the Persona... the Arena series, so I hope you were looking forward to that. God damn it, that was a good take.